Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome back to the playing field and episode 10 of the first series. Delighted to have Mr. Paul Temple with us today for another bumper edition, and really excited to kind of delve into Paul's journey over the last few years. Before we start, I just want to say thank you for those that have tuned in to all of the episodes so far. It's been a fantastic response from all over the world, but particularly in NZ. And we're certainly keen to ensure that we continue to shine the light on coaches in New Zealand. So one of the first people that we had on the playing field on the early episodes 1 and 2 was Mr. Paul Temple, who's now currently at the Wellington Pheonix. And I want to welcome back Paul today for a special Coach in Focus episode. So welcome, Paul, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
It's been another one of those journeys for Paul and I that has been going on for quite a long time. I first met Paul back in 2009 through quite a fortuitous mutual friend who got me into football in NZ in the first place. So yeah, really appreciative of Paul and his support over the years, and obviously it's great to see his journey today, which I'm keen to make sure other people listen to as well. So whilst I went to New Zealand in 2009, Paul, when did you first arrive, and how did that move to NZ come about?
So I arrived in New Zealand towards the back end of 2000, where I came out to play in the New Zealand National League. I was playing in the youth team at my club in England, and a lot of my friends were going off to university in the new year and such, or had just started. So I was at that point where I was looking for something different to do, and I too had a friend who I knew who had immigrated back to New Zealand, who I knew in England, and they advised me to get in touch with some people in New Zealand, gave me some phone numbers to call. Back in those days, it was pick up the phone and speak to people. So, yeah, I spoke to one or two clubs, and I ended up coming out to play for quite a prestigious club in New Zealand, University Mount Wellington, who at the time were one of the sort of bigger clubs around. So it was a really great place for me to go, and they were fantastic to me. I came in and I played for 3 seasons for University Mount Wellington in the National League, and hung around New Zealand, and in between seasons, once or twice I ducked back home and to England, and then came back again. And then really from sort of 2003, I became permanently settled in New Zealand, really, and just continued to play for a little while. But by that stage, I had really started to turn my attention to coaching, and so New Zealand was able to give me some really fantastic opportunities on the coaching front, which was great for me and my journey. And I learned a lot and had some really good people to learn from. So I was fortunate enough to get some great opportunities in New Zealand, and I ended up staying, and here I am. 20 years later, almost. So it's been a fantastic time, and one that I've really enjoyed.
And how quickly did you get into coaching? Once you were here, I mean, you said obviously you played for a few years. Were you coaching concurrently? Did you wait till you finished? I mean, how did you kind of get into it to begin with?
Yeah, I actually started coaching with Jose Figuera, who you had on a few weeks ago, when we were both 16. We grew up in the same town in England, and so we were coaching on the Crawley Town, who are now in League One, where they had a community program. And we were coaching on their community program on a Saturday morning, and then going off and playing our game for the youth team or whatever in the Saturday afternoon. And we did that for a wee while, actually. And that kind of was the first step into coaching for us. And we had some really good mentors there. When we look back, we're actually quite fortunate. A guy that we used to work with in that program, Scott Harrison's now academy manager at Woking. So it's produced a few good people, that program. And it was great for us. We had good fun. We got paid for doing it. We didn't have to go and get a job like anybody else in a retail store or doing something that we didn't enjoy. So we were getting paid to do something that we loved. And we kind of got the coaching bug from there, really. So when I turned up in New Zealand, I'd actually already had a B license at 19. And so I kind of told the club I had this UEFA B license, and they got me straight into coaching. So even when I was playing at 19 for Mount Wellington's first team, I was coaching the women's team at Mount Wellington, some kids teams as well. And they were essentially just paying me to do a bit of coaching, and that was how I was earning enough money to live, really. So I'd been coaching right from the very start. And then I guess when I got to about 21, 22, I realised that, I was okay as a footballer and I could play a reasonable level in New Zealand, but I wasn't going to be a top professional player at that stage. I think I had pretty good self-awareness around where I was as a player, and I was missing a few of the tools. So I kind of decided, well, I love the game and I want to keep helping the game grow, and I love New Zealand. So I started really digging my teeth into becoming a coach. And so I was playing and coaching concurrently, seriously coaching between the age of probably 21 and 27. And then I got a bad injury at 27 playing in the season where you arrived. And I might have even been a little bit older than that. But yeah, around 2009, I got a sort of nasty injury with my ACL. And so that put me out for like a year. And rather than do all the hard work and get back to playing again, I pretty much just focused all my attention on coaching, and I sort of transitioned into being a full-time coach from there, really.
You obviously did enough in those early stages to progress through the New Zealand coaching ranks reasonably quickly. You got an opportunity to be part of the women's national team program at age group level. Again, how did that come about, and what type of levels did you get to, and how far through campaigns did you get with the age group teams?
Yeah, so I again, just through the way that the world works, New Zealand's got the hosting rights for the Under-17 Women's World Cup in 2008. They got that, I think, around 2006, and at that time I was still doing a little bit of coaching in the women's game in terms of I think I did a National Women's League campaign with Auckland Football, and I was still playing, but trying to ramp up my coaching. And Jose and I had actually done some coaching at Western Springs with their women's team as well, and in that team we had some players that would go on and do really well for the Football Ferns in the future. We probably didn't know it at the time, but we had a really strong team of players, and so I was in and around the women's game. And then when New Zealand Football got the hosting rights for the World Cup in 2008, I applied for the role, and I was fortunate enough to be given it. And so I was appointed the coach of the Under-17 team for that World Cup. I was 26, so I was young and very, very enthusiastic around trying to do a great job. And I learned an awful lot through that process, because not only did I have to manage a national team and selections for national team and all the things that go with being an international coach, but also the highlight of being at home, and the media attention and the extra attention that was on you off the field was something that was invaluable process for me to go through, because it is quite different when you're at home at a World Cup to as when you would be away. The host nation do get a lot of attention and press, so I kind of had to learn all those things that top level coaches have to learn. I learned it on the job as we went, and I was still young, so it was a challenging environment, but I really enjoyed it. And as I say, I learned some really valuable lessons around what to say and how to handle the media and what the perception of you and your team is in media circles on the big stage. And it's obviously a tough tournament as well, being a World Cup. The teams are the best in the world, and you're having to compete against the best teams in the world. So it's a huge challenge for us. From there, I then went and moved into the under-20 women's team with that same group of players as an assistant coach, and worked with Tony Reddings in 2010 with the under-20 women's team. And we went to the World Cup in Germany at under-20 level. And then the following cycle, 2012, I went back down and started a new cycle with the under-17s again. And I took that team to the World Cup in Azerbaijan in 2012 as the head coach. So I managed to get some fantastic international experience all before the age of 30. And that's why I was so thankful to New Zealand football and its coaching pathway, because there's not many countries in the world where you could be given that opportunity. Obviously, you have to be good enough and do a good enough job to keep going. But at the same time, the opportunity being there was just amazing for us as coaches coming through the system at that time. And it certainly made me a much better coach and something that I was able to take on in future years.
So, I mean, that record of being 26 and the youngest age group head coach, I mean, that stood for a long time. You also then were able to get multiple World Cup campaigns at age group level. At that point, were you kind of set on youth development and youth football kind of being the area that you were keen to specialise in, or did you still have an aspiration to kind of go into more senior environments? Kind of where were you at that time?
Yeah, I think when you're on your coaching journey, there's kind of two kind of streams to it, I guess I would describe it. There's kind of what you want, your ambition, and then there's what presents itself. And at that time, when we'd finished in 2012 in Azerbaijan, I'd just turned 30, and I kind of saw that as an important milestone for me in coaching. Up until that point, I was all about just getting as much experience as I possibly could, doing as much coaching. I was trying to do as many sessions as I could every week, in as many different environments as I could. I was enjoying the women's football and being part of that, set up internationally with New Zealand. But at the end of that World Cup, I kind of made a conscious effort to diversify myself a little bit. I didn't want to kind of get pigeonholed into one particular part. And so I was, again, in a position where I'd formed some relationships prior. When you arrived at Three Kings United, I was playing there, and then I got injured, and then went off to the World Cup a few years later. And through sort of contacts at Three Kings, Paul Marshall called me and asked me to go and work with him at Waitakere United in the National League, probably the week after I got back from Azerbaijan in 2012. So I kind of went from under 17 youth development women's football to senior men National League coaching. And I dived straight into that and kind of wanted the opportunity, because at that time Waitakere had an amazing squad and were challenging Auckland City for league titles and things. So I was going straight into an environment where I could work with the likes of Roy Krishna and Ryan De Vries, Alan Pearce, Jake Butler, Danny Robinson, to name a few. And David Mulligan, I think, was even there at that time. So there were some, All Whites, ex-All Whites, and some seriously good footballers that I could work with. And that kind of challenged me massively in coaching, because now all of a sudden the game was different, a bit quicker, style was different, and the demands of the players were certainly different. So I had to kind of adapt between communication between young female players and how to talk to them, how to get messages across, how to kind of set up tactically to full-grown men who have got high demands of training environments and huge experience internationally as well. So then adapt into that environment. So that was really great for me. I learnt a lot coaching in the National League with Waitakere, with Paul, and we did some O-League campaigns, won some titles, and it was a really good time, and I loved my time there. It was great. And then from there, I got the opportunity to kind of go on my own to North Shore and take the team myself and kind of set myself up at North Shore United. And I had visions of kind of building something there over a number of years. But after my first season, I got a phone call from Wellington, from the Wellington Pheonix, to ask if I'd be interested in coming down to be part of the academy and help grow their academy down here. And I couldn't really turn it down. It's the only pro club in the country, and they had great ambition setting up what they wanted to do. And it was a chance for me to come in and see the A-League up close and work with some really top coaches and top people in the game here. So we decided to move from Auckland down to Wellington at the start of 2016, and then we've been here for the last 4 or 5 years now in my role as academy manager working at the Pheonix.
So you mentioned there that obviously a lot of it is around the opportunities that present themselves. You went from the heights of being involved in the National League with senior players, and then you've kind of had to kind of change direction again to working with youth footballers. Again, has that been a fulfilling change? Do you look at senior football as being something that you'd like to get into eventually, or has your kind of youth football been something that you've really been able to kind of get your teeth stuck into now?
Yeah, I enjoy both. They present different challenges. Youth football is certainly more of a long-term project because you don't quite see the fruits of the labour in terms of how much they're putting in as players and then what you're putting into them as coaches. You don't see that immediately. It's a process. It takes time, so you have to be quite patient. And you're also sort of trying to mould a young person's life as well. Like they're generally, I've been working with players between 15 and 19. And that age, they're kind of really finding who they are as kind of grown-ups. They're turning from boys to men, and they're finishing high school and going off to make big life decisions. So you're kind of around them, and you're an influence in their life, an important part in their life. And so youth development is more around the whole package and putting good messages, good values, good morals, good habits, behaviours into them as much as you can. Whereas when you're coaching in the senior men's environment, you do still sometimes have young players that need help and guidance coming through into men's football, but you're also dealing with established, grown-ups who have got kids and families of their own. They know what they want, they know what they're about, and they need to be treated a little bit differently in terms of how you communicate with them. But I guess what I've learned from, especially my time at the Pheonix, because I get this balance all the time between some weeks I have like this young dressing room and other weeks I have a dressing room which has got loads of senior players in it who have sometimes played 100, 200 A-League games. You soon realise that coaching is coaching and the game is the same. And the demands and what people want and the expectations of what everybody wants in the dressing room are also the same. It's just sometimes how you communicate it to different people and how you might motivate people in different scenarios, whether they're young kids coming through trying to make the grade or whether they're pros that are stepping down to get some minutes or get over an injury to get back into the first team. You still got to be a coach, and you still got to try and help them because everybody's still developing. It's just I think the senior players are a little bit more assured of themselves and who they are and how they like things, and become creatures of habit. Whereas the young players are a little bit more malleable. You can have a little bit more influence on how things are done there. So yeah, I enjoy both. I don't necessarily see myself as I'm a youth developer or I'm a senior coach. I just class myself as a coach, and I just have to change and adapt to the environment that I'm in, depending on what that is. And I feel that's one of the biggest things coaches should try and work on is the adaptability, flexibility. I talk a lot about being a coaching chameleon. You have to adapt to your surroundings. That's what it is. Understanding what's in front of you. It's not one size fits all. It's very much a case of tailoring how you conduct yourself and your messaging, your communication, your behaviours in each environment. Some are more appropriate to others. And your coaching scale, whether you're being really explicit and sort of demanding and instructional based, you can do that in certain environments, but it's not appropriate in others. And you've got to be more question and answer based, guided discovery, and you've got to work on the continuum depending on who is in front of you and what their needs are at that particular time, what the time of the sort of season is. You'd work more with a more open mindset with senior players in the pre-season window, where you've got time to sort of adjust tactics and move things around, than you would if you're in the height of a playoff push and you need to win games to get up. You know, you'd be a little bit more instructional as the week's going on. So it's just about finding the balance and being adaptable. And I think, you know, being adaptable is one of the most important things that a coach can have in their toolbox.
You know, having arrived at the Wellington Pheonix in 2016, there's obviously a process you've got to go through to help, you know, build the youth program there. Was, you know, what did you have to work with to begin with in terms of, you know, structure, philosophy, guidance, and kind of how have you evolved that over time?
Yeah, I think first of all, the club are great. Everybody that's here is really passionate about the Pheonix and about the game. And so that's a really good starting point. You know, there's a real positivity in this club, and it's been through a lot in its short lifespan. So people are quite resilient as well. And I was fortunate, you know, when I first arrived, Andy Hedge was here, who's a really great coach mentor. He does that now for a living, and he's really good at sitting back and just kind of seeing how things play out and then putting in pearls of wisdom. And so I had that for the first sort of 18 months or so that I was here. And that was really helpful. And I also walked into the club at a time when Ernie Merrick was the coach. And Ernie is a fantastic human being. He's also a very good coach, a great person. And he was just so open to helping people. And so I was really fortunate that I had technical people like that straight away that were on my side and helping me. And then both of those people moved on, and the first team coaches changed, and my role sort of evolved a little bit. But all along, the club have been pushing to try and improve. And so it's been good because you have that kind of support network around you, which I think is really important. But it's really challenging as well, because I don't think people realise until they actually arrive at the Pheonix how different it is at the Pheonix to anywhere else in New Zealand. It's the most unique environment, arguably the most unique environment in world football, because we have a football club who's the only professional football club in its country, and it has to, underneath the first team, if it wants an academy, that academy has to mix with domestic amateur football, but represent pro football in Australia at the same time. We work across capital football, New Zealand football, the FFA, OFC, and the Asian Confederation. So we've got sort of 5 different governing bodies, if you like, that all affect what we do. We play in all these different leagues, from regional to local to national to international. It's a minefield of things that you have to kind of go through. So whenever you're making a decision at the Pheonix, it has so many ripple effects to so many different areas of the game. Whereas if you're just working in a club, it's just about your club and your league really that it affects. Whereas the Pheonix, it's incredible to understand how all the nuances of decision making, how it affects things. So it's a really, really difficult place to be in terms of those things. And I don't think people quite appreciate the pressures that some of the people at the Pheonix are under when it comes to those sort of decisions. And so, yeah, it's been an amazing learning curve, you know, to think of when you're making decisions and have to kind of have this real foresight on how it's going to affect everything. And look, we don't get everything right, but we're certainly trying to do things in the right way and try and get our point across the way that we want to, and try and help the game as well as improving ourselves. And that's a part of the philosophy, I guess, that we've all sort of bought into.
And then from a coaching side, I mean, obviously you have, you know, big oversight into kind of how that looks at the Pheonix and some of the work that you've done, I guess, internally with players and coaches to help, you know, get that message across. Yeah, how are you working on the philosophy of the club from a playing and coaching perspective? Do you have any ways in which you're kind of working with your people on that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, like most environments, and as you would be expecting. We have a general philosophy that we stick to, and that we want the players and the coaching staff to adopt. But I think for me it's really important to distinguish that word philosophy. I think it's something in football terms that gets used a lot, and I think it sometimes kind of overlaps itself. And so for me, philosophy is is defined by, it's the attitude that acts as guiding principles and behaviors. So for me, that's it's not really a technical thing. So your philosophy as a coach, as a person, is about how you act, how you behave, and what your guiding principles are. And so I think you have to distinguish that and then what your playing model is, rather than your football philosophy. So your playing model is obviously your tactical strategies and how you would actually play the game, and then your coaching philosophy is how you would act and behave and what your principles are as people. And so we try and separate those two things, because our environment is, for me, is one of our biggest strengths, the environment that we create, and that's the philosophy. So that's who we are as people when we're at the Pheonix, and when the players arrive, how we are, how we act, how we behave, the environment that we create, the way that we coach the boys, the way that we talk to them, the way that we advise them, the way that we can kind of work along the spectrum. That's really important. And that's something that I think has been one of my biggest work-ons as a coach, is kind of really understanding what that is. I think when you're young, most coaches are copycat coaches. They see something that they like or they think looks good and they copy it, and then they kind of put it in their bank, and then they find something else and they copy it. And you see that on Twitter, right? There's constant drills and exercises, but they're all in the context of that particular drill and exercise, but that doesn't get communicated. They just get put out there. People take it and then apply it in their context, which is sometimes different. And so that process, I think, is a natural process that happens, and everybody's going to do that. But I think what's really important is you always ask yourself the question, how does that relate to me, and what would I do with that, and have an understanding of what you might do. And think, what I think you've also got to kind of really look at your environment, what comes up in my environment that's related to attitudes, related to behaviors and common messages, what comes up a lot in my environment. And then how do I want to behave around those things? So what are these common traits that I keep seeing? And then what's my attitude towards them? So how am I going to deal with this from a behavior point of view? How am I going to deal with this that keeps coming up from a behavior point of view? What are the constant things I get from new players that arrive in the environment that aren't used to it? How do I deal with them? How do I communicate with them? These are constant things that I deal with daily. And so I have to have a philosophy of me, who I am and how I would deal with that, so that there is that consistency and they know who I am and they've got a bar that's been set. So I'll give you some examples. So every single player that starts with the Pheonix Academy, I would take them to one side and say, I'm not expecting you to be your best for at least 3 months. And they look at me as if I'm mad. And then I explain that you've arrived in a new city, you're going to a new school, you're away from your family, all these kind of factors. You don't quite realize yet how much it's going to affect you, and how that affects your mood, and how that will affect your consistency of your mood. And so you'll have an up and down few months, and the training will be your kind of safe place that you love being here, and this will be your kind of get out. But you won't be at your best until you've really settled into the other things in your life. So I'm kind of trying to explain to them how all these things affect their football, and if they look out for doing other things well in life, their football will improve. And then it pretty much happens like clockwork, 2 or 3 months of up and downs, good days, bad days, and different days. And I keep talking to them about it and saying that I told you this would happen. Don't worry, I'm not stressed. You don't need to be stressed. You're not going to get kicked out. This is a long-term project. And then once they settle in, it gets that 2 or 3 month mark and things start to change, and then they start to kind of excel. And then And then straight away, they've kind of learned that, okay, this is a type of environment that I'm in now. They're going to support me, and they understand what I'm going through. They understand the process, and we've built a connection. I had a boy this summer who signed with us, striker, who had a lot of ability, a lot of talent. Obviously, we brought him into the program, and he didn't score for like 3 or 4 games, you know, and you could tell straight away his head's thinking, I need to score, like I'm playing for the Pheonix in the National League now, like why can't I score? And the conversation I had with him was all about what he's bringing to the environment. So I showed him, these are your GPS running stats. This is now when you're in the team, we've pressed this much better, like 20% better pressing. You're running 20% more than the guy that was in before you. You're adding this to the team. You're allowing us to do this. You're allowing us to do that. Watch this clip of you doing this. Like, you've changed the way that we've played, and that's enough for me to pick you. So don't worry about when you're going to score the goal. You'll score the goal. Just worry about doing all those things that you've been doing and consistently doing those. And I know that you're giving me what I need, and we'll sort the finishing out later, like take the pressure off, you know. And then lo and behold, next game he scores a goal, and then it kind of like goes from there, you see. So it's just about, for me, what our philosophy is in terms of helping players understand their environment, and kind of that we can create a safe environment for them on their journey. And we understand that it is a journey, and that it will take time, and they won't get there straight away. And just kind of really getting to grips with that. And it's difficult because you've got to see when the players kind of like are in a learning pit, and then when they come out of it, and then you don't want them to get up the hill too much and for it to become easy and comfortable. So then you've got to throw them something else for them to get back into the pit again and kind of start learning and going through the process. So you want them to feel comfortable with their environment, that they love being where they're being and they feel safe, but you also want them to be challenged and pushed, and so that they can develop and progress. So it's a bit of a fine balance, but that for me is the philosophy. That's what we do as people for our people. Whereas the coaching style and the coaching methodology, or the playing way, that is about tactical flexibility. And tactical flexibility is probably the phrase that would cover me and cover the academy in the best possible way, most accurately. It's really hard to own that, because generally in football, a lot of coaches and people in the game see a playing style as the philosophy, and that's what you get known for. And so if you're Johan Cruyff and Barcelona, you're famous for playing total football, 4-3-3. With Holland and with Barcelona, and that's kind of what he's known for. But if you actually dig deep, you'll realise that Cruyff also played 3-diamond-3 with Barcelona, and he changed his formation a little bit, 4-3-3. But he actually adapted and was flexible as well with his systems. So I think it's difficult, because you can't quite judge tactical flexibility as easily as you can if you stick with one way and you only have one way. But we have tactical flexibility for a number of reasons. One of those is that when you get to the top end of the academy, we have to replicate what the first team do. And the first team, we've had a new coach for the last 4 seasons in a row, starting. So, and every coach is different with how they want to play. So this season, the academy team in the National League have been doing what Ufi does in the first team with the A-League. We've been playing 4-4-2 and 4-box-2 and playing that kind of style and that way that the first team played. The year before, with Mark Rudin, we played with 3-5-2, and we were quite counter-attacking and got forward quicker, and it was different. So we have to sort of teach them all these things. And I think the tactical flexibility is really important, because we don't know where our players are going to go, and we have to prepare them for whichever environment they get into. You know, a number of our boys go into the first team, but they could go into the first team with a new coach, or the coach could change after a year. And so they have to be able to play, or understand at least a number of different ways tactically to be able to play, and still have an overriding understanding of this is how we like to play the game, but we can do it in these different strategies. So it's trying to help them prepare for whatever environment they go into, whether it's a US scholarship and the coaching and the style is different, whether it's a club overseas where it's different, or if it's the first team where it's different. And so we kind of mix up the formation and the tactics and the strategies a lot, but we try and keep these kind of constant things that go on, which is the simple stuff in terms of how you prepared football players, how you press and where you press and when you need to drop into shape and protect, and when you need to play on the counter attack, or when you need to keep possession, and when you're trying to dominate the ball. So we kind of have all these things that are constants, but then we change the strategy and tactics around it.
Mm. And for those that are listening that are trying to develop a youth program or trying to evolve their own, what would be kind of your 2 or 3 main points of advice to kind of go look at these things or consider these things when you're trying to evolve or put something together?
Yeah, I think maybe going back to the philosophy of what you guys are like as a coaching team when you're putting a program together, how you want to be. I think that's really important. Like how you want to be. Will you come home after training and be happy with who you are, with your players? Are you giving them messages that you're proud of, that you're happy with, that you can live with? Is your environment what you want it to be as a person, not just necessarily as a coach? I think that's really important. Sometimes we are perhaps too nice in terms of we will talk to players, and sometimes we'll actually say to them that I think, in all honesty, the best thing is that you do this or you do that, and that might not actually be for the betterment of the program or the team at times, but we're kind of trying to say to the players, look, listen, you've got to do what's right for you here, and that's an important lesson for you in life. You've got to think about the team, but you've also got to do what's right for you and put yourself first at times, and there's times to do that. So we have this real understanding collectively of how we're going to be around players and how we're going to create our environment and what we're happy with and and that in turn then dictates how I would recruit staff to fit into that model. Some people that I know would follow me in terms of this is how we're going to be around the players and this is what our philosophy is. So that's important. And then also just holding each other accountable. Most of the conversations that happen in our office between coaches are philosophical debates about how we deal with a certain situation as opposed to a tactical discussion. We're constantly talking about what's the right thing to do in this situation, what needs to be done and how does it need to be communicated and who's the best person to deliver that message. So we get into a lot of detail around our environment and what that looks like. So if I was setting up a youth program from scratch, the first thing I would do is list down what I want that to look like, knowing that in youth football, as I said before, you've got teenagers, you've got pre-teens. What are the common factors that come out in their life? How are you going to deal with school, club, life balance? How are you going to deal with loading, training? Who's going to give first? Are you going to give a little to gain their trust, or are you going to come down hard and demand that they do what you do first and give up other things? How are you going to deal with balance is better about them as a kid, being a kid, or is it solely professional football environment and you're battering down the door on them dedicating themselves more? How are you going to do the balance, and how are you going to communicate that, and how are you going to deal with that with the players, with the parents? Those are the questions that will dictate whether your environment will be successful or not, and people will come to you or not come to you depending on what that is. And I think that's really important. For me, that's the first thing to get sorted, and then the second thing would be, okay, what do we want to teach them in terms of, are we going to play one way and one way only, or are we going to mix it up? And what's our common principles on the pitch that we're going to teach, and what are the kind of common things that we want to keep getting across as the message that are age appropriate. I think that would probably come secondary to how the environment looks.
Nice. And knowing you as I do, Paul, I know that you will be spending a lot of time considering those things, with your staff, and also your own development around those things as well. So it's been a fascinating 40 minutes listening to your journey from obviously where you started coaching so early, and maybe some of the decisions you were making around your career at that stage have led you to where you are now. So I just want to thank you for sharing your time, and I'm sure that a lot of the things that you have put across will be helpful to everyone. But thank you for sharing those things.
No problem. It's always great to talk to you, and if coaches want to reach out and get in contact, then you can do that on my Twitter, and we can kind of have some discussions around the coaching side of things. And we always try and have an open door policy here in Wellington. So if there are coaches around that want to come and see what is going on and how we do things, then the door's always open for that. We're very conscious that we have to be a leader in kind of helping as well as delivering. So open door policy as much as possible. Share. We're not in the business of keeping all our secrets or magic formulas if we have any. It's about sharing, and it's about kind of helping coaching, helping the game. New Zealand at the moment is in a really good space. Got so many good coaches. A number of them you've spoken to, and I think the profile of the coaches in New Zealand is getting better through various different media things, and so we want to be part of that and help, and if we can do our bit, we certainly will.
Excellent. That's a very generous offer, Paul, and thank you. And I'm sure that many people that are tuning in will take you up on that. And certainly feeds into kind of where we're sat as a playing field. We want to help that process. We want to help people along and connect with people, and certainly showcase like support and others that have been on the program in recent weeks. So thank you again all for listening. We're back again next week with one of our next episodes, but we're certainly looking forward to seeing you all on the playing field again very soon.